Welcome. In this video, we're going to be examining Daniel chapter 11, verse 31. It reads, "Forces sent by him shall occupy and profane the temple and fortress. They shall abolish the regular burnt offering and set up the abomination that makes desolate." End quote. So as you can see, the second part of our verse is making reference to the abomination of desolation committed by Antiochus IV. But before we can speak about this, we first need to speak about the first part of our verse, which says, "Forces sent by him shall occupy and profane the temple and fortress." What exactly is this referring to? Well, it's referring to the military outpost constructed by Antiochus IV to house his soldiers. And this fortress was constructed in close proximity to the temple and therefore was seen as sacrilegious. The Jews called this fortress the Akra, which is an abbreviation of the Greek Acropolis, which means citadel or stronghold. Newsom, in her commentary, writes the following, quote, "The citadel was the fortified high area, Akra, somewhere near the temple, where the foreign troops were stationed," end quote. Okay, the next question we need to ask ourselves was, when was the Akra constructed? Well, in our previous video, we spoke in depth about the Sixth Syrian War, which occurred between 169 to 168 BC. The next major event after this is the Abomination of Desolation, which occurs in 167. And according to our sources, the Akra was built between these two events. So what are our sources for the Akra? Well, we have 1 Maccabees chapter 1, we have Josephus, and we also have some archaeology as well. Let's begin by talking about 1 Maccabees chapter 1. But before we dive into the text of it, let's just remind ourselves of our timeline. In our previous video, we went in depth into the Sixth Syrian War, and we know it consists of multiple events. Antiochus first attacks Egypt, then he attacks Jerusalem, then he attacks Egypt for a second time, then he attacks Jerusalem for a second time. Now, 2 years after his second attack on Jerusalem, he attacks Jerusalem for a third time. So this would be about 167. And this is where 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 29 picks up. It reads, quote, "2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute, and he came to Jerusalem with a large force. Deceitfully he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him, but he suddenly fell upon the city, dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. He plundered the city, burnt it with fire, and tore down its houses and its surrounding walls. They took captive the women and children and seized the livestock. Then they fortified the city of David with a great strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel." Now, the Greek word used there for citadel is Akra. 1 Maccabees then continues to describe the Akra in verse 34, quote, "They stationed there a sinful people, men who were renegades. The citadel became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil adversary of Israel at all times. On every side of the sanctuary, they shed innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary." End quote. So as you can see here in our 1 Maccabees quote, there is lots of references to how the Akra was an affront to the sanctuary, which is of course the temple. And we continue to read about this in our next source, which is Josephus. So Josephus writes in his Antiquities of the Jews, book 12, the following, quote, "Antiochus built the Akra in the lower city, for it was high enough to overlook the temple. And it was for this reason that he fortified it with high walls and towers, and stationed a Macedonian garrison therein." Nonetheless, there remained in the Akra those of the Jewish people who were impious and of bad character, and at their hand the citizens were destined to suffer many terrible things. In another part of his book, Josephus writes the following, "At this time, the garrison in the Akra of Jerusalem and the Jewish renegades did much harm to the Jews. For when they went up to the temple with the intention of sacrificing, the garrison would sally out and kill them. For the Akra commanded the temple." End quote. So Josephus makes it abundantly clear that the Akra was an offense to the temple, as it prevented the Jews from properly worshipping. And this validates what we read in Daniel chapter 11 verse 31, that forces sent by him shall occupy and profane the temple and fortress. End quote. So we now move on to our third and final source, which is archaeology. So in 2015, the Israel Antiquities Authority announced they uncovered the Akra. This occurred when they were excavating behind the southern wall of the Temple Mount and found remains that date to this time period and which seem to be a military outpost. So as you can see before you, here is the base of their excavations, and it's believed that from this extended up the Akra, which overlooked the temple. Perfect. And with all that being said, we have now surveyed all our sources for the Akra. It's now time to move on to the main event of Daniel chapter 11. So previously, we saw the Sixth Syrian War. In this video, we spoke about the Akra. Now it's time to talk about the abomination of desolation, which occurred in 167. I hope you join me for the next video when we delve into that topic. As always, if you're enjoying these videos, your support would be greatly appreciated. So please consider supporting me on Patreon. Find the link in the description below. A small donation of even just $1 a month makes a big difference. So please consider donating if you can. If donating isn't something you can do, it's still tremendously helpful if you hit that like button and leave a comment. Finally, make sure you're subscribed to get my next video. Thank you for watching until the end. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.